that I was donor conceived, and there was a certain parameters of what I should think about, and I don't need to think any further about who my donor was because it was a medical thing. I didn't even think of it as a person. It was only in my 20s that I started realizing that there was bigger ramifications for me, and that I seemed to have far more enthusiasm about supporting other people, my friends' identity, than my own, because I didn't really understand my own identity. And the argument that I'm here to present to you is that reproductive technology is inherently adult-centric, that particularly where I've been seeing it in practice, that people who are targeted as donors and that people who are created by the industry are also stakeholders that have separate interests that need to represent themselves. And there's a conflict of interests when you've got the industry itself and the industry users basically calling all the shots. Ultimately, there's a huge amount of profit in this fertility industry. It's estimated to be worth nearly $5 billion by 2025. And this Swiss cheese, legal Swiss cheese around the world, is something that generally creates great opportunity for trade. And what happens is you start off initially with the concept of the best interests of the child being paramount. And when you have the two stakeholders, the industry itself and the industry users, defining law, this is reduced to, or downgraded to, the welfare of the child is taken into consideration as far as practicable. Who defines the welfare of the child, and what principles are those based on? It seems that there's a very shaky notion of even what the welfare, the best interest of the child is one thing, but now it's become the welfare, and actually what that means is just incredibly slippery. It's just a way of glossing over the idea that our interests are somehow covered, but ultimately I don't believe they are. Normally, in practices that involve children, it's usual in law to state that the best interests of the child are paramount, owing to their special vulnerability and our inability to speak for ourselves in that situation. The child's rights to have their natural family recognized and protected by law has now been reduced to a child's family being contracted and fortified by law. What happens in that process, the large percentage of our genetic family is brought out of legal recognition for the purpose of the industry. The consequences in terms of, lots of people talk about the take-home baby rate is the outcome that's being tested. Happy families go home with their take-home baby rate, and it's all considered a great outcome. But the actual long-term consequences tend to really kick in much later in life. For me, they started in my 20s, and I'm 45 now, and the journey's not stopped. And the impact for my children as well, if you have access to your medical history. But it's an example of the fact that you cannot trust the industry and the industry users to define and defend our interests, because for the last 100 years, they've failed. What we need now is a paradigm shift in reproductive technology away from adult-centric treatment and applying normative standards to protecting the best interests of the child. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. We know what's in the best interest of the child. In law, we've always said that being known and raised by your genetic family matters. If it matters for some, it matters for all. If it doesn't matter, then let it not matter for everyone. Just everybody give birth, and anybody can take home any baby from that ward. It doesn't matter, right? Or protect it for all. We need multidisciplinary protections to counter this conflict of interest from the industry and the industry users. We need an acknowledgement that this is a social experiment, and ultimately, there is nowhere for the people to turn when the experiment is going wrong and hurting us. And yet, they still assume it's going very well. And finally, I'm hoping that we can respect the kinship identity, genetic identity for all groups in society, and not seek to sell that from a special group. Thank you for your time.